Okay, and welcome back, students who are taking financial accounting, and we're working on the Chapter 1 assigned problems, the Group B, and the only problem we have left is problem 1-40. So let me jump down there. All right, there we go. And this one is about error analysis and preparation of the balance sheet. It says it's going to take 20 to 25 minutes to do this problem. I'm going to either end up doing this in either one or two videos, okay? And as always, if you don't understand something, like for example, as I'm talking about creating the balance sheet, if you don't understand why I'm doing something when I create one, watch the other videos for the other problems where I am explaining it. And if you still don't understand something, feel free to contact an instructor. So it says here, the IT manager of On-Call Realty prepared the balance sheet of the company while the accountant was ill. The balance sheet contains numerous errors. In particular, the IT manager knew that the balance sheet should balance, so she plugged in the retained earnings amount to achieve this balance. That's called cooking the books, and you go to jail for that. Okay. The retained earnings amount, however, is not correct. All other amounts are accurate, but some were out of place. So our requirement is to prepare a new corrected balance sheet. So let's see what we've got wrong here, and then we'll just go and create the new one from what we have wrong. All right, so when I'm looking at the heading, it shouldn't be month ended because the balance sheet shows the financial position of the business as of a specific date. So that heading date should say as of November 30th, 2014, or it should just have the date itself, November 30, 2014. It shouldn't be month ended. That's wrong. So if I just got rid of that, those words month ended, my heading date is correct. Okay, let's see. Next thing. Okay, assets are on the left, liabilities and equity are on the right. I have total assets, that's good. Okay. When I look at my assets, okay, let's do it from that perspective. Assets are on the left, liabilities and equity are on the right, so that's good. Next, what accounts belong where? So cash is an asset, that's good. Rent expense is in the wrong place, that's an expense, and that should be on the income statement, so should supplies expense. Okay. Now salaries payable is a payable account, that's a liability account, so that should be over here in the liability section. Okay. So this here is a liability. Equipment is fine, it's something we own. And then of course we have our total assets, and the formatting is right. It's all in one column, have an underline and double underline, and have our dollar signs in the right places. Okay, so for our liabilities, accounts payable is in the right spot. Payable is liability. Again, utility expense, expenses belong on the income statement, not on the balance sheet. Accounts receivable is an asset. It's something that's owed to us, not we owe, okay? So it's owed to us, so that's something we own, so that's an asset, not a liability. Notes payable is fine. That goes under liabilities. And since we have three liability accounts, accounts payable, salaries payable, and notes payable, all right, the way we should format our liability section should be the amounts in the left-hand column, right? And then we're missing the total liability description here and the amount of the total liabilities here. Okay. Okay, under stockholders' equity, common stock is fine. Supplies is an asset, doesn't belong in this equity section. Retained earnings is fine, except that's wrong. Okay. It was just plugged in. All right, that number was plugged in, so we know that amount is not correct. our total stockholders' equity, that description is fine, and then the total liabilities and stockholders' equity, that's fine. So really, there's not much to this, all right, as far as formatting is concerned. We get rid of these expenses. We have three expenses here that don't belong here. The salary payable, so let me do it like this. Okay, so, and yeah, I'm going to use the pen. So rent expense does not belong here. Supply expense does not belong here. Utility expense does not belong here. They should all go. Okay. I'm going to use the yellow highlighter to mark off my assets. So cash is an asset, it belongs here, and equipment belongs here. The accounts receivable belongs over in assets. I'm using yellow for assets, okay? And the supplies here belongs over in assets. So those accounts all belong in the assets. I'm going to use blue, well, let me back up here, yellow for assets, okay? I'm going to use this light blue for my liabilities. So the salaries payable is a liability account, accounts payable, and notes payable is a liability account. Okay, so they're in the right spot. And then I'm going to use green for the stockholders' equity. So common stock belongs there, and retained earnings belongs right where it is. So we're going to end up grouping, the accounts underneath the proper categories, right? And aside from, like I said, the formatting, other than the heading date here being wrong, and just the accounts in the wrong places, all the formatting with the dollar signs and the underlines and double underlines and the descriptions for the totals are all fine, except we need to add in a total one here for liability. And also too, I'd have two columns. I'd be using the two columns for my liabilities. All right. So let's go over to the blank screen, and I will quickly sketch this out. And remember, I am not, I'm just doing this for myself. So I'm going to take my liberties knowing of abbreviating and things like that, knowing the underlying concepts. But if I were to present this information to somebody else, I would, of course, type it up in a Word document, and I would follow all formatting issues. Meaning I wouldn't abbreviate. I'd capitalize, make sure spelling is right, underlines, double underlines, indentations, and so on and so forth are all correct. All right, so for my heading, I have the name of the company, then I have balance sheet, and then I have the date. Okay, and just follow along with the process. Remember, if you were watching the exercise videos, I said I go through process all of the time, almost like step by step, so that I don't miss anything. Right. So I'm going to put the word assets next, then liabilities, and then stockholders' equity. So there's my category of accounts. So under my assets, I had my cash, I had accounts receivable, supplies, and equipment. Okay, so if I come back up here, as you can see in yellow, there's my cash, my accounts receivable, my supplies, and my equipment. Okay, they were all marked in yellow. Now for my liabilities, I have payable, accounts payable, salary payable, and notes payable, right? So over here, I'm going to have accounts payable, salaries payable, and notes payable. And for my stockholders' equity, which was in green, I had common stock and retained earnings. So over here, I'm going to put my common stock and my retained earnings. Okay, now once I have those categories in, right, let me put in my descriptions for my totals. All right, so for assets, I'm going to have a total asset because I'm going to want to add up all of my total assets. And of course, that's going to be a mathematical calculation, and it's going to be a final figure, and that means I have to have a dollar sign. I'm going to do the same thing with my liabilities. I'm going to have total liabilities, okay? But in this case here, I'm going to end up using two columns, okay? So even though for my total liabilities, in the left-hand column, all right, I'm going to put my figures, okay? And then I'm going to have an underline, and I'm going to write my total liability in the right-hand column, the summation of that mathematical calculation, okay? So left-hand column, I'm going to draw the line to show that I'm going to add up all three of these numbers, right? And whatever that amount comes to, I'm going to, put right there, okay? Why? Because in this column, okay, I'm going to add up my liabilities plus my equity, right? Which now takes us down to our equity, okay? So I need to know what my total stockholders' equity is. So I'm going to have total stockholders' equity, okay? And that I'm going to do the same thing, all right? I'm going to have a mathematical calculation in the left-hand column and put my total there, okay? And the reason why I'm doing that is because now I have to add my liabilities plus my equity. So I'm going to have a total liabilities plus stockholders' equity, okay? And that's going to be the mathematical calculation from this column here. See, I have my total liabilities here, and I have my total equity here. Well, that's going to give me the math, so I draw an underline, and since it's a final calculation, I have the double underline, and of course I put the dollar sign there, okay? So now all it is just a matter of, filling in the numbers and doing the math, okay? So for cash, all right, since it's the first number in the column, I put a dollar sign so it shows that it is a dollar figure, and that was 31,000. Accounts receivable was $3,200. Supplies was $580, and equipment was $8,100. Okay, and just so you know, that's I'm getting these numbers, right here. Here's my 31,000. Here is my accounts receivable of 3,200. Here is my supplies of 580, and here's my equipment of 8,100. Okay, so that's going to total up, and I'm going to end up with $42,880. Okay. Now, liabilities. I have accounts payable, supply payable, and note payable. Well, it's the first number in the column gets the dollar sign, and the accounts payable is 2,500. Let me write that a little bit better. 2,500. My salary payable is 1,100, and my note payable is 7,000. Okay. I got those figures in blue. Okay, so my accounts payable is this 2,500, my salary payable this 1,100, and my note payable this here 7,000. Okay, so they total up to $10,600. Okay, and I put a dollar sign there because it's the first number in that column. Now remember, I'm adding my liabilities to my equity in order to get a total liability and stockholder equity. Okay, so that's my liability section. Right? Now for my equity, I have common stock of 10,000, but let me come up here to green. Okay, so I'm pulling the 10,000 off of my common stock, but this retained earnings amount is incorrect. Remember, she just plugged that in, okay, in order to arrive at a number, right? And we know that's wrong because, I mean, look at our assets are not the same, okay, because we have expenses in here. So now we have a new asset amount, okay, and what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to back into what this retained earnings amount is, okay. So if I have, and I'm going to do it in blue, if I have $42,880 as my assets, remember assets is equal to liabilities plus equity, okay? And if my liabilities are 10,600, okay, so let me do it this way. Assets equals liabilities plus equity. And if my assets are $42,880, that's equal to my liabilities of 10,600 plus equity, right? In order to isolate my equity, I subtract the liabilities from the assets, minus 10,600 is equal to my equity, and that will give me 42,800, whoops, 42,800 minus 10,600. That means my equity is going to be $32,200 of equity. I'm sorry, $32,280 of equity. Okay, so that's going to be my total stockholders' equity right here, 32,280. And if my common stock is 10,000, right? So remember, equity is equal to my common stock plus my retained earnings. So if my common stock is 10,000, right, and my earnings are, my equity is 32,280, so my retained earnings has to be $10,000 less, or 22,280. Okay, and then of course the 10,600 plus the 32,280 gives me my 42,880, right? And that's what my balance sheet should look like. Okay. So that's what it should look like. Not so sloppy, but you're getting the gist of it. And of course, you're going to type it up and present it, in a much better fashion. Okay, so that's all there is to this particular problem. It just, all we had to do is prepare a new corrected balance sheet. The only difference between this and what you're seeing as part of the solution, obviously I'm not concerning myself with abbreviations and things like that, but the major difference is I'm using 2 columns here, okay, which means I'm using a multi-step formatting versus single-step formatting, which is the way the textbook is presenting it. And in the last problem, when I went over the balance sheet, I explained the difference between multi-step and single-step and when it's being used. The solution, it's like I said, it's being shown as a single step, but single step is really only used for like sole proprietorships, very small businesses that have very few accounts. If you start getting into any amount of calculations on your financial statements, you automatically move over to multi-step and you use multiple columns. So when you're looking at the solution, realize that you could have done it either way, okay, but the way you see it on the screen here is the preferred way, all right, is the way that you'll see it most often, right? So with that, I'm done with 40B, and we're actually done with the problems for Chapter 1. Okay, so on your in the student community under financial accounting, you'll see the beginnings of Chapter 2, the theory videos in the next section. All right, so I'll see you then.